Hello. When it comes to traitors during the Great Patriotic War, the name of General Vlasov inevitably comes up first. An officer with an impeccable reputation, a hero of the defense of Moscow, who cared for the well-being of his soldiers, did the unthinkable. He defected to the enemy. This act seemed so incredible that at first it was perceived as an absurd fabrication of German propaganda, an attempt to demoralize Soviet soldiers. Alas, this information was later confirmed, and Vlasov's further tragic fate became public knowledge. However, few people know that Vlasov was not a pioneer in this grim affair. One of the first high-ranking officers who not only surrendered to the Germans, but also actively sought to build a career in the Wehrmacht, was Brigadier General Ivan Besanov. In the summer of 1941, at the very beginning of the war, when the fate of the country hung by a thread, he voluntarily went over to the enemy, betraying his homeland, his oath, and his comrades in arms. Like Vlasov, Ivan Besanov positioned himself as an outstanding, talented commander. He did not participate in the Civil War, beginning his military service in 1920 with predominantly administrative staff positions. After graduating from the cavalry school, Besanov demonstrated rapid career growth. In 1931, he already held the position of Assistant Chief of Staff, and from 1938, commander of a regiment in the NKVD troops, and joined the party. In 1939, he headed the Combat Training Department of the NKVD border troops, and in 1941, on the eve of the war, he already commanded a brigade within the 102nd Rifle Division. At first glance, an impressive, brilliant career for a 37-year-old officer, a party member, a representative of the High Command. However, there was one very disturbing episode in his biography: his refusal to participate in the Soviet-Finnish War, allegedly motivated by health problems, for which he was temporarily transferred to Transbaikalia. This fact may indicate the presence of certain personality traits that subsequently pushed him to treason. We ask you to subscribe to our channel, like the video, so you can hear many more interesting stories about World War II and the opinions of all participants on various events. On June 22, 1941, the day the Great Patriotic War began, Besanov's division was stationed near Kremenchug and was then transferred to Chernihiv to organize the defense. However, the division's defensive positions could not be held, and the commander was removed from his post. Besanov was appointed the new commander with a perfectly clear task: to stop the advance of German troops at all costs. Initially, the soldiers showed courage and resilience, successfully carrying out the order, but later, under increasing enemy pressure, they began to retreat and, as archival documents testify, stretch along the front. This happened due to ineffective, chaotic command, including from Besanov. In addition, it is necessary to take into account the significant superiority of the enemy in forces and resources. On August 12, 1941, the 102nd Division was surrounded. In this desperate situation, as often happens in war, the surviving units, broken into small, scattered groups, tried to break through the encirclement. One of these groups was led by Besanov. However, by August 26th, his group was almost completely destroyed. Instead of fulfilling his duty and fighting to the last bullet, as befits a Red Army officer, Besanov chose his own path and surrendered. Besanov did not try to create the appearance of patriotism and immediately offered his services to the German command. Such haste and willingness to cooperate may have caused some surprise among the Germans, but they, of course, did not refuse to cooperate with an experienced Soviet officer who had valuable knowledge of the structure and tactics of the Red Army. Besanov was sent to Hamelburg, a special camp for prisoner-of-war officers, where a new stage of his life began: collaboration with the enemy. Surprisingly, it was Besanov, even before Vlasov became a symbol of betrayal, who began to voice in German captivity ideas about creating a new state within pre-war borders, with a democratic system, free trade, and nationalization of industry. He was also the first to put forward the proposal to form separate combat units from prisoners of war to fight the Red Army not only in the rear, but also at the front. The idea of supporting local formations also belonged to him, although the Germans already provided them with support. In fact, when Vlasov was captured, he did not offer anything fundamentally new, but simply used the ideas already formed by Besanov. The key difference was that Vlasov had significantly more authority among the soldiers, and therefore some of the prisoners of war followed him. It was this factor that caused the Germans to bet on Vlasov, while Besanov was relegated to the background. Besanov naturally perceived Vlasov as a competitor and categorically refused any cooperation with him. Subsequently, he was transferred to the Zeppelin organization, which specialized in training saboteurs. However, Besanov did not bury his ambitious plans and developed a new, even more grandiose project to organize a large-scale uprising in the Gulag camps. He claimed that, as a former NKVD officer, he had deep knowledge of the system from the inside, its weaknesses, and ways to influence it. The plan was to secretly infiltrate saboteurs into the camps, who would discreetly supply the prisoners with weapons and organize an uprising. The insurgent prisoners, according to Besanov's plan, were to not only seize control of the camps, but also paralyze transport communications in the country, dealing a serious blow to the rear of the Soviet Union. To implement this ambitious plan, Besanov proposed dropping about 6,000 well-trained saboteurs throughout the Soviet Union. This plan certainly interested the German command, which saw in it the potential to destabilize the situation in the Soviet Union. However, a serious, practically insurmountable problem arose: where to get 6,000 people ready for such a dangerous mission. By 1943, Germany's position at the front had deteriorated significantly. Losses were enormous, and it was simply unrealistic to allocate such a number of people. It was also not possible to find a sufficient number of suitable candidates in the prisoner of war camps. As a result, only two small groups of 50 people each were formed. In June 1943, the first group of 12 saboteurs, disguised as NKVD officers, was dropped into the Komi ASSR. Thus, out of the planned 6,000 saboteurs, only 12 were sent to the rear of the Soviet Union. What was the fate of these unfortunate people? Did they manage to at least partially fulfill Besanov's grandiose plan? Alas, no. Within a week, most of the group was captured by NKVD officers, while the rest were liquidated during the arrest. A little later, another group of 12 people was landed near Syktyvkar. Communication with them was lost almost immediately after landing, and most likely they suffered the same sad fate. This essentially ended the activities of Besanov's sabotage groups. The Germans, of course, were extremely dissatisfied with such meager results. In addition, they were seriously alarmed by Besanov's constant talk about creating an independent state and his irreconcilable conflict with Vlasov. As a result, despite all his efforts and active cooperation, Besanov lost the trust of the German command and was sent to the Sachsenhausen concentration camp, where he spent the rest of the war until April 1945. After the liberation of the camp, he fell into the hands of American troops, who, in turn, handed him over to the Soviet authorities. The investigation into Besanov's case lasted 5 long years. Throughout this time, he stubbornly denied his guilt, claiming that he did not cooperate with anyone and spent all this time in captivity. However, the collected evidence irrefutably testified to the contrary. Even his later confession, most likely caused by the hope of mitigating the sentence, could not save him from punishment, the highest measure. Goodbye. We were glad to see you on our channel. Don't forget to write comments, like, and subscribe to the channel.